They said we were harmless. That was before we broke the universe. The voice of Captain Elias Voss echoed in the dimly lit cockpit of the Vanguard's Edge. Through the reinforced viewport, the void of space stretched endlessly, stars shimmering like distant promises. But it wasn't the stars Elias focused on, it was the swirling vortex of distorted light emanating from the core chamber below deck. The Singularity Core, humanity's most audacious creation, pulsed like a heart, bending reality with each thrum. Elias leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of exhaustion and tension. The Vanguard's Edge, a stealth-class frigate designed for evasion rather than confrontation, vibrated faintly as its engines strained to maintain their cloak. The Dominion's patrols weren't far behind. "Status report," Elias said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. A holographic projection flickered to life beside him, revealing Chief Engineer Lonnie Orris. Her usually sharp features were drawn, her lips pressed into a thin line. "The core's destabilizing. It's drawing too much power from the ship's systems, and we're pushing the limits of containment. If we can't stabilize it, we might not have to worry about the Dominion, they'll just find debris." Elias rubbed his temples. "Options? Shut it down," she replied bluntly. Before he could respond, the hologram blinked again, replaced by the face of Lieutenant Ralvik, the ship's weapons specialist. "Sir, we've got incoming. Dominion scouts, 3 clicks out. They're running wideband scans." "How long until they spot us?" Elias asked. "Minutes if that," Ralvik replied. His voice was steady, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. Elias rose from his seat, his movements precise and deliberate. "Lonnie, buy us time. Divert power to cloaking. Ralvik, prep evasive maneuvers. We're not letting them take the core." In the lower deck of the Vanguard's Edge, the core chamber was a scene of barely controlled chaos. The room thrummed with energy, the walls bathed in an eerie, shifting glow. Lonnie worked furiously at the control console, her fingers a blur across the interface. Beside her, Dr. Malik Grev, the physicist responsible for the core's creation, paced like a caged animal. "This is madness," Malik muttered, his voice tinged with both fear and awe. "We're not ready for this. The core was never meant to leave the lab, let alone face pursuit." Lonnie shot him a glare. "Complaining won't help. Either you stabilize it, or we're all dust." Malik hesitated, then approached the core. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, swirling with colors that defied description. He extended a gloved hand toward the console, his breath hitching as he keyed in commands. "It's not just destabilizing. It's learning." "Learning?" Lonnie repeated, incredulous. Malik nodded, his eyes wide. "The core isn't just a machine. It's adapting, reacting to stimuli. The Dominion was right to fear it, but not for the reasons they think." Before Lonnie could respond, the ship lurched violently, throwing them both to the floor. Alarms blared, and the intercom crackled with Elias's voice. "Lonnie, status!" She scrambled to her feet, gripping the console for support. "We've got containment, but barely." "What the hell just happened?" "Dominion scouts," Elias replied grimly. "We've been spotted." In the cockpit, the tactical display lit up with red markers as Dominion ships closed in. Elias gripped the controls, his jaw tightening. The Dominion vessels were sleek, predatory, and bristling with weapons. Against them, the Vanguard's Edge was a fragile shadow. "Ralvik options?" Elias barked. "We can't outrun them forever," Ralvik admitted. "But there's an unstable wormhole nearby. It's risky, but it might shake them." Elias frowned. "Define risky." "Uncharted exit point, potential gravitational anomalies, and a 50-50 chance it tears us apart," Ralvik replied matter-of-factly. Elias let out a sharp breath. "Better odds than facing them head-on. Plot a course." The ship veered sharply, engines roaring as it raced toward the wormhole. Behind them, the Dominion scouts opened fire, streams of energy lighting up the void. The Vanguard's Edge shuddered under the barrage, its shields flaring with each impact. "Lonnie, we need more speed!" Elias shouted into the intercom. "Working on it," came her reply, followed by a string of curses. Below deck, Lonnie rerouted power from non-essential systems, the lights flickering as she pushed the ship to its limits. The core, as if sensing the urgency, pulsed brighter, its energy output spiking. Elias's fingers danced over the controls, his focus unyielding. "Hold together, old girl," he muttered under his breath. The wormhole loomed ahead, a swirling maelstrom of light and shadow. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a gateway to the unknown. Elias gritted his teeth. "Brace for impact." The Vanguard's edge plunged into the wormhole, the ship bucking wildly as space itself seemed to collapse around them. The crew was thrown against their restraints, the sheer force threatening to tear the ship apart. Panels sparked, and alarms blared in a cacophony of chaos. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no light, just an endless void. Then, with a jarring lurch, the ship emerged on the other side. The stars looked wrong, their patterns unfamiliar. Elias's vision swam as he struggled to reorient himself. The cockpit was eerily silent, save for the labored hum of the ship's systems. "Lonnie, status," he croaked. "Still here," she replied after a moment, her voice shaky. "Barely. Core's stable, for now." Relvic groaned from his seat, his face pale. "That was a hell of a ride." Elias allowed himself a brief moment of relief before checking the tactical display. The Dominion scouts were gone, their signatures nowhere to be found. But the sense of victory was short-lived. "Captain!" Lonnie's voice came through, urgent. "You need to see this." Elias made his way to the core chamber, his boots echoing in the dim corridor. When he arrived, Lonnie and Malik stood frozen, their faces pale as they stared at the core. Its surface had shifted, now displaying intricate patterns that looked almost organic. "What is it?" Elias demanded. Malik turned to him, his expression a mix of awe and dread. "The core didn't just adapt. It evolved. It's alive." Elias stared at the shimmering device, his mind racing. The implications were staggering and terrifying. Humanity had created something that defied understanding, something that could either save them or doom them all. Before he could respond, the intercom crackled with Ralvik's voice. "Captain, you're going to want to get back to the cockpit. We've got company." Elias sprinted back to the cockpit, his heart pounding. The tactical display lit up with new signatures, larger, more menacing than the scouts they'd evaded. Dominion cruisers. Ralvik's voice was grim. "Looks like they brought the heavy hitters." Elias clenched his fists, his mind racing. They couldn't fight, and running wasn't an option. The core was their only leverage, their only chance. "Lonnie," he said into the intercom, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Get ready. We're going to need every ounce of power that core can give us." "Captain, are you insane?" Malik's voice cut in. "The core is unstable. If we push it too far, it's that or die here," Elias snapped. "Your call, Doctor." There was a pause, then Malik's resigned reply. "Understood." Elias turned to Ralvik. "Plot a course for the nearest safe haven." "And Ralvik?" "Yeah?" "Make sure they remember who they're dealing with." As the Dominion cruisers closed in, the Vanguard's edge powered up, the core's light flooding the ship. Elias gripped the controls, his gaze hard. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. Now, they were about to show the galaxy just how dangerous they could be. And he wouldn't let them forget it. The Vanguard's edge drifted silently in the vast, lawless expanse of the Siphon Nebula, its hull cloaked in the murky glow of the surrounding ion storms. Captain Elias Voss stood at the observation deck, staring out at the swirling clouds of gas and debris that stretched endlessly around them. The eerie beauty of the nebula masked its danger. Any wrong move could overload the ship's systems, but for now, it provided them with the cover they desperately needed. "We're safe for the moment," Elias muttered, though his grip on the railing remained tense. Safe was a relative term, and they were far from it. Behind him, Lieutenant Ralvik adjusted his shoulder holster and leaned against the bulkhead. "Safe until the Dominion sends their hounds sniffing through. We barely outran them last time." Elias turned, his sharp gaze locking onto Ralvik. We don't have the luxury of pessimism right now. We need to think ahead. The soft chime of the intercom interrupted their conversation, followed by Lonnie Oris's voice crackling through. Captain, we need you in the core chamber. It's doing something new. Elias exchanged a glance with Ralvik. You're in command. Keep us hidden. Without another word, he made his way down to the lower deck, his boots echoing lightly in the confined corridors. The core chamber was dimly lit, its usual pulsating glow now shifting erratically. Waves of shimmering energy rippled across its surface, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Dr. Malik Grev stood before the console, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. I don't like that look, Elias said, stepping inside. Malik exhaled sharply. You shouldn't. The core, it's evolving, Captain. Faster than I anticipated. Elias crossed his arms. What do you mean by evolving? Malik hesitated, running a hand through his graying hair. It's reconfiguring itself, rewriting its own energy output pathways. Every test we conducted before indicated it needed external input to function at this level. But now, it's adapting on its own. It's responding to stress in ways that weren't programmed. Lonnie, stationed at the control panel, glanced up. If it keeps adapting like this, there's no telling what it might do. The Dominion was right to fear it, Elias. This thing could become uncontrollable. Elias stared at the shifting patterns within the core, his mind racing. They had stolen the core to ensure humanity's survival, but now it felt like they were carrying a ticking time bomb. Can we shut it down? He asked. Malik shook his head. Not without risking catastrophic destabilization. Right now, it's stable, but if we force it, it could rupture space-time on a scale we can't contain. Elias sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Options? Lonnie spoke up, her voice steady. We have one. There's a station in the Ophidian Belt, neutral ground, outside Dominion control. Black market traders, information brokers, the kind of people who can help us find a way to offload this thing safely. Elias considered it. The Ophidian Belt was dangerous, a haven for mercenaries and warlords who traded in stolen tech and secrets. But right now, they had nowhere else to turn. Set course, he said finally. Let's see if anyone out there is crazy enough to help us. Hours later, the Vanguard's edge slipped into orbit around Station Epsilon, a massive conglomerate of patched-together modules and docking platforms drifting in the shadow of a massive asteroid. Rusted metal and flickering lights defined the station's exterior, a reflection of the lawless chaos within. Ralvik stood by Elias as they prepared to disembark. I don't like this place. Feels off. Elias smirked. That's because it is. Keep your hand on your sidearm, but don't shoot unless I say. The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into the station's bustling market district. Alien traders with multi-limbed appendages hawked exotic wares, their voices a chaotic blend of dialects. The scent of burning metal and questionable food hung thick in the air. Elias kept his eyes sharp as they wove through the crowd, heading for the contact Lonnie had arranged, a smuggler named Volek, known for dealing in restricted tech. They found him in a dimly lit booth, sipping a neon-colored drink. Volek, a reptilian humanoid with slick, scaled skin, looked up with an amused expression. Captain Voss. I heard you were dead. Elias slid into the seat across from him. Rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. Volek chuckled. What brings you to my humble corner of the universe? Elias leaned forward. Information. And discretion. The smuggler's eyes glinted with interest. You have something unique, don't you? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid a data chip across the table. Volek inserted it into his console, his eyes widening as he scanned the encrypted contents. This is impossible, Volek whispered. The Singularity Core? I thought it was a myth. Not a myth, Elias said grimly. And I need to know how to control it before the Dominion catches up. Volek's gaze darkened. You don't control something like this, Captain. You survive it. Before Elias could respond, an alert flashed on Volek's console. The smuggler cursed. Dominion operatives. They're here. Elias bolted upright. Where? Valak gestured to the entrance. Coming in hot. Elias turned to Ralvik. We're leaving. Now. The market erupted into chaos as Dominion soldiers in dark armor pushed through the crowd. Elias and Ralvik moved swiftly, blending into the throng of merchants and customers. Shots rang out, and panic swept through the station. Back to the ship! Elias ordered. They weaved through narrow corridors, ducking under scaffolding and slipping through side passages. The Dominion troops weren't far behind, their heavy boots echoing through the station. As they neared the docking bay, a bolt of energy scorched the wall beside Elias. He spun, returning fire, hitting one soldier square in the chest. Ralvik covered their flank, taking down another before they pushed through the final set of blast doors. Lonnie's voice came through their earpieces. Hurry up! We're picking up more inbound Dominion ships. Elias sprinted aboard the Vanguard's edge, slamming his fist on the control panel to seal the airlock. Punch it! The ship roared to life, engines flaring as it detached from the station and shot into the nebula's depths. The Dominion ships were right on their tail. Back in the cockpit, Elias caught his breath, eyes fixed on the sensor readings. The Dominion forces were closing in fast, their ships weaving through the dense gas clouds with precision. Ralvik options? Elias demanded. Ralvik's fingers flew across the controls. We can't outrun them, but there's a gravity rift up ahead. If we hit it at the right angle, it might throw them off. Elias glanced at Lonnie. Can the core handle it? She hesitated, then nodded. It's risky, but it's our best shot. Elias gritted his teeth. Do it. The Vanguard's edge plunged into the rift, the ship shaking violently as gravitational forces pulled it in all directions. The Dominion ships followed, but one by one they began to struggle, their trajectories faltering. We're almost through! Lonnie shouted. With a final burst of power, the ship broke free of the rift, emerging into open space. Behind them, the Dominion ships were caught in the gravity well, spinning helplessly before being dragged into the swirling void. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Elias remained tense. He knew this was only a temporary victory. Lonnie approached him, her face grim. We can't keep running forever. Elias nodded slowly. No, we can't. We need a plan, and we need it fast. Ralvik leaned back in his chair. And what do we do with the core? Elias's eyes hardened. We find a way to use it. On our terms. As the Vanguard's edge sped deeper into uncharted space, Elias knew their fight was far from over. But one thing was certain: humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The Vanguard's edge floated in the silent void, cloaked and drifting beyond the reaches of known space. The aftermath of their escape from Station Epsilon lingered heavily in the stale air of the bridge. Captain Elias Voss stood at the viewport, staring out into the abyss, his jaw set in a hard line. Behind him, Lonnie Orris ran diagnostics, her fingers tapping rapidly against the console. We're running on borrowed time, Captain. The core's activity is becoming erratic. It's shifting energy patterns faster than our systems can compensate. Elias didn't turn. Can you stabilize it? She hesitated. I can try, but it's like patching a hole in a sinking ship. Sooner or later, we'll run out of patches. Lieutenant Ralvik entered the bridge, his expression grim. Dominion's tracking us. They're deploying sensor drones across the sector. If they don't already know where we are, they will soon. Elias clenched his fists. We can't keep running. We need to take the fight to them. Ralvik raised an eyebrow. Against their fleet? With what, Captain? A science experiment we can barely control? Elias turned sharply. We have something they don't: ingenuity. The core isn't just a weapon, it's a message. They fear what they don't understand. That's our advantage. Malik Grev's voice came through the intercom. Captain, you should see this. Elias strode briskly toward the core chamber, Ralvik and Lonnie following close behind. The moment he stepped inside, he felt it. The atmosphere was thick with static, The faint hum of the core had deepened into an ominous thrum. Malik stood over the console, sweat beading his forehead. It's evolving again. The patterns it's forming, they resemble navigational pathways. Elias frowned. Navigational pathways? For what? Malik pointed at the holographic display. I think it's trying to show us something. A star system, coordinates far beyond Dominion space. It could be random, but it feels deliberate. Lonnie's brow furrowed. You're saying it wants us to go there? Malik nodded slowly. Or maybe it's where it came from. Elias studied the data. The coordinates led to an uncharted region, far beyond Dominion borders, deep in the Veil Nebula. The implications gnawed at his mind. If the core was leading them somewhere, it meant it had a purpose beyond their understanding. Relvik crossed his arms. Following breadcrumbs from an unstable superweapon. Sounds like a bad idea? Elias exhaled slowly. It's our only shot. If there's an answer to controlling this thing, it's there. Set course. The Vanguard's edge roared through subspace, its engines straining as it cut through the dark. The closer they got to their mysterious destination, the more volatile the core became, pulsing in sync with an unseen force. As they neared the system, alarms blared. Dominion vessels inbound! Relvik called out, tension thick in his voice. They must have traced our jump signature. Elias cursed under his breath. Lonnie, can we make it to those coordinates? She checked the readouts. Barely. But they'll be right on our tail. Then we make it count, Elias said, locking eyes with his crew. Relvik, prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers. Lonnie, keep the core stable for as long as you can. Malik, pray this place has the answers we need. The ship shook violently as enemy fire grazed their hull. The Dominion cruisers closed in, sleek and menacing, their weapons primed. Incoming transmission! Lonnie shouted. Elias hesitated before accepting. The screen flickered to reveal the cold, reptilian features of high strategist Zyrakel, her expression unreadable. Captain Voss, she said, her voice smooth and calculating. Surrender the core. Now. Elias smirked. Afraid of what we've created? Zyrakel's eyes narrowed. What you've stolen is an anomaly that threatens all known existence. It does not belong to you. Elias's jaw tightened. It belongs to no one. You just want to bury it because you're afraid of change. She leaned forward. This is your final warning. Stand down, or be eradicated. Elias cut the transmission. I'll take my chances. Punch it! The ship surged forward, weaving through debris and asteroid fields, each evasive maneuver pushing it closer to its limits. Explosions flared in the distance as the Dominion ships continued their relentless pursuit. Then, without warning, the ship broke through the nebula's dense clouds, and what they saw on the other side stole the breath from their lungs. A massive, ancient structure floated in the void, bathed in the soft glow of a dying star. It pulsed with an energy signature identical to the core. Malik whispered in awe. It's a construct. Maybe even the origin of the core. Elias's eyes locked onto the structure, his instincts screaming that this was what they had been searching for. Lonnie, bring us in. Relvik, hold them off. The Vanguard's edge plunged toward the station as the Dominion ships closed in. The docking bay doors, massive and ancient, slid open with a sluggish grace, as if welcoming them home. Once inside, the ship landed with a heavy thud, the crew scrambling out. The interior was vast, filled with towering columns and intricate carvings of an unknown language. The walls pulsed with the same ethereal glow as the core. This place, Malik whispered. It's alive. Lonnie scanned the area. Whatever it is, we don't have much time. Dominion forces are landing. Elias nodded. We find answers fast. They pressed forward, guided by the pulsing light of the core in Elias's hands. The deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to react, symbols lighting up in response to their presence. Then, they reached the heart of the structure. A central chamber, vast and cathedral-like, housed a larger version of the core. Its surface pulsed in sync with theirs, creating a resonance that vibrated through the air. Malik approached the console, his hands trembling. This could be the control interface. Elias motioned for him to proceed. Do it. Malik keyed in a sequence, and the chamber hummed to life. The symbols shifted, forming a pattern that displayed a stark message in an ancient script, one that somehow they could all understand. Balance must be maintained. Knowledge must be earned. Power must be respected. Elias swallowed hard. Looks like we weren't meant to have this power so soon. Before they could process the implications, gunfire echoed through the chamber. Dominion soldiers poured in, weapons raised. Relvic took cover behind a column. We've got company! Zyra Kell stepped forward, weapon drawn, her gaze locked onto Elias. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Captain. Hand it over. Elias's mind raced. If they gave up the core, humanity's future would be erased. If they kept it, they risked unleashing forces beyond their control. He made his choice. Relvic, Lonnie, activate the ship's auto-defense protocol. We're taking this place down. Relvic's grin was fierce. Finally, some action. Gunfire erupted, and the chamber became a battlefield. Elias moved toward the core, hands steady as he interfaced with the ancient technology. Lonnie shouted over the chaos. Elias, whatever you're doing, do it fast! With a final command, the station began to tremble, energy surging through its walls. The Dominion forces faltered, their weapons flickering, and Zyra Kell's expression shifted from arrogance to fear. Elias smirked. Looks like your fleet's out of luck. Zyra Kell's eyes burned with rage. This isn't over, Voss. Elias grabbed the core, its energy now stabilizing in his hands. It is for now. He sprinted back to the ship with his crew, the station collapsing around them. The Vanguard's edge roared out of the docking bay just as the structure imploded in a brilliant flash, sending shockwaves rippling across space. As they fled into the safety of hyperspace, Lonnie looked at Elias. What now, Captain? Elias stared at the core, its glow now steady in his hands. We figure out what comes next. And this time, we make our own rules. Relvic grinned. Sounds like a plan. The stars stretched ahead of them, and Elias knew humanity's future had just begun. The hum of the Vanguard's edge filled the air, steady yet heavy with an unspoken tension. In the aftermath of their daring escape, the crew sat in the dimly lit war room, holographic displays flickering with data pulled from the destroyed station. Captain Elias Voss stood at the head of the table, his gaze fixed on the rotating model of the ancient construct now reduced to cosmic dust. Lonnie Orris leaned back in her chair, exhaustion written across her face. So we destroyed the only place that could have told us what the core really is. What now? Elias rubbed his temples. We might have lost the structure, but we still have the data. We decrypt it, learn from it, and figure out how to use the core against the Dominion before they corner us again. Relvic crossed his arms, his voice laced with skepticism. And how exactly do we fight them, Captain? Their fleet outnumbers us 100 to 1, and we're running on fumes. Dr. Malik Grev shifted nervously. The core's data suggests something different. Not an outright fight. A disruption. If we can harness its abilities correctly, we could manipulate space in ways the Dominion won't expect. Elias's eyes narrowed. Explain. Malik tapped the controls, and the display shifted to reveal complex energy waves. The core wasn't designed as a weapon, it's a tool to shape reality. It can create controlled distortions, localized time dilation, even short-range spatial folding. Lonnie's eyebrows lifted. You're saying we could outmaneuver them in ways they can't counter? Exactly, Malik replied. We can create unpredictable tactical advantages. But there's a catch, we have to test it in the field, and if the Dominion catches us before we're ready, it could all backfire. Elias exhaled slowly. The weight of their situation pressed against him like a crushing tide. We'll have one shot at this. We need a distraction, something to lure the Dominion into a position where we control the battlefield. Relvic leaned forward, a sly grin tugging at the corner of his lips. I think I know just the place. Sector 8 Kappa. The abandoned mining colony on Thalare. Old Dominion outpost, but stripped down. It's got just enough tech left to make it look like we're holed up there. Elias nodded. We fake our presence, draw them in, and hit them hard with the core's capabilities. He locked eyes with his crew. We're not running anymore. It's time we show them what humans are really capable of. Hours later, the Vanguard's edge hovered just outside the ruins of Thalare, a desolate planet covered in jagged cliffs and deep craters. Once a thriving Dominion mining world, now it lay forgotten, its surface scarred by centuries of neglect. The ship's engines purred as Lonnie and Malik worked feverishly in the core chamber, fine-tuning the delicate balance between control and catastrophe. This is insane, Malik muttered, sweat dripping from his forehead. We're using technology we barely understand to bait the most powerful force in the galaxy. Lonnie smirked, not looking up from her console. Welcome to humanity, Doc. We improvise. Elias's voice crackled through the calm. How much longer? Almost there, Lonnie replied. Core synchronization at 90%. We'll have enough stability for controlled bursts, assuming it doesn't fry us in the process. Elias's voice carried a hard edge. We'll take our chances. Get ready. As soon as the final adjustments were made, the core pulsed with a rhythmic glow, perfectly synchronized with the ship's systems. Malik stepped back, wiping his hands on his uniform. It's done. Whatever happens next is up to you, Captain. On the bridge, Ralvik monitored the scanners. Dominion forces inbound. 3 capital-class warships and a handful of support cruisers. They're not messing around. Elias stared at the display. They expect an easy victory. Let's disappoint them. He activated the false signal relay planted on the surface, projecting a decoy fleet signature strong enough to convince the Dominion they were heavily fortified. Within moments, the enemy fleet altered course, accelerating toward the decoy site. They took the bait. Ralvik grinned. Good, Elias said. Lonnie, engage the core. The Vanguard's edge trembled as the core's energy field expanded outward, distorting the fabric of space around them. The Dominion fleet, unaware of the trap, pressed forward, closing in on the fake signal. Activating spatial distortion, Lonnie announced. Suddenly, the space around Thalare shimmered and bent. Dominion ships slowed, their sensors struggling to interpret the shifting environment. Weapons fire from their ships veered off course, missing phantom targets as the core's influence took hold. Elias watched carefully. Now let's move. With surgical precision, the Vanguard's edge darted between the confused Dominion ships, weaving through their ranks like a phantom. Ralvik's hands danced across the controls, expertly guiding the ship through the chaotic battlefield. They're firing blindly. Ralvik laughed. Elias grinned. Keep them confused. Lonnie, push the core's limits. We need more interference. Lonnie's fingers flew over the console. Pushing to 70% output. Any more, and we risk a cascade failure. The Dominion's flagship, looming in the distance, unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, piercing through the distortion. Elias clenched his fists. They're adapting faster than I thought. Malik's voice cut through the calm. Captain, we can use the core's folding ability to jump behind their flagship, hit them where it hurts. Elias considered the risk. A miscalculated jump could tear them apart. But they needed an edge. Do it, he ordered. The core pulsed, and the Vanguard's edge vanished in a blink, reappearing directly behind the Dominion flagship. Before their enemies could react, the ship's rail cannons fired, tearing into the flagship's engines and sending it spiraling. Direct hit! Ralvik shouted. Elias didn't hesitate. Finish them off! The core flared one final time, sending a shockwave that destabilized the Dominion fleet's formation. In the chaos, the Vanguard's edge made its escape, vanishing into the nebula's depths. Hours later, Elias stood alone in the observation bay, staring out into the stars. The Dominion had been dealt a blow, but it wouldn't be the last fight. Lonnie stepped in beside him. We did it, Captain! We beat them today! Elias nodded slowly. Today! But they'll come back stronger. She studied him. Then we'll fight harder. Elias's lips curled into a faint smile. Yeah, we will. The Corps sat in containment behind them, pulsing gently, as if waiting for its next command. Elias knew their journey was far from over, but for now, they had earned a moment's peace. And that was enough.